let's be a sad clown. I'm Comical, and I made my Pomni cosplay from Amazing Digital Circus in 2 months. Let me show you how I made it. So with every cosplay that I make and pattern myself, I just use a duct tape pattern. Once you have your duct tape pattern, you're going to draw all of the seam lines. For my bodysuit, I think I ended up with 8. I did the middle, and then I did princess seams on the sides of the front bodice, and then I also did back seams to accommodate for my weirdly shaped body. I did mess up the stripes in this part. What I'd recommend doing for Pomni specifically is to print out a photo or just have it on your phone and wear it in the mirror and hold your phone up to the mirror if you're like me and just cannot figure out mirrored stuff to save the life of you. It actually worked out in my favor because by doing it wrong, it told me the right way to do it. So I literally just cut out all of my red fabric in the blue part of the mock-up and my blue fabric in the red part of the mock-up. But let's learn from my mistakes, shall we? For the bloomers and the sleeves, that was a completely different story. I specialize in corsets and circle skirts, so that part was really easy to pattern. The bloomers and the sleeves though, they were not. I suck at making sleeves. I suck at making pants. So I came out with this specific pattern for the sleeves and the bloomers, and it actually took me 3 tries to make. The first try, the sleeves were okay, they just weren't big enough for my taste, and the bloomers felt too big. I patterned it again, and I literally had the exact same problem. So I decided to literally unpick the bloomers and make them the sleeve pattern, and then make the sleeve pattern the bloomer pattern. And that's what worked for me. Now that our mock-up is done, let's talk about fabric choice. So fabric choice can really improve a cosplay build just because it can give you texture, it can give you variety, it can give you cohesion, and really interesting notes into your cosplay. So I was really inspired by chaoticantic on TikTok and Instagram. I loved the sequin patterns that they used on their Pomni cosplay. I also was taking inspiration from anyapanda, who also used like this sequence material on their Pomni cosplay, and I wanted to go the route by kind of thinking outside the box as far as Pomni. Because let's be honest, girl, it's looking a little uninteresting. I am a Gothic Lolita fashion haver. No, it is not related to the book. No, these are not costumes. Yes, I dress like this all the time. Now that we've gotten that out of the way, one of my favorite materials is velveteen. It is a fur, for lack of a better word. The thing that I like about velveteen is that it's got a very deep, rich color to it. So for the red portion of her cosplay, I used this velveteen fabric from Fabric Wholesale Direct. You could always go the route of upholstery velvet as well to get a similar kind of texture to this. So for the blue portion, I used this, I think it's duck canvas. It's the blue one from Fabric Wholesale Direct as well. To make it a little bit more exciting though, I used this like sheer fabric and I flat laid all of that to the blue portion. I got this fabric from Etsy, and here is the listing that I used. So once you have all of your pattern pieces cut out in the fabric that you want, then you're going to need to serge these pieces. Velveteen frays really bad, so you're definitely going to want to check that one especially. What I used for the yellow portion of the costume is polyester dupioni, and personally I think it matches the yellow lace a little bit better, and I wanted a really nice, shiny, interesting texture to go with the costume, especially since we have that like matte vibe going on with the tulle and the velveteen. Now that we have our fabric choices for the fashion fabric layer, let's actually get to assembling the bodysuit portion of the costume. I love making corseted pieces, and I wanted something slightly corseted for Pomni, but this is a casual cosplay, this isn't a comp build. Not everything needs to be corseted. Anyway, I did want a little bit of structure though with her costume, so I flatlined all of the bodysuit layers to coutil. I only did half of it though, so from the torso up is flatlined with coutil, the rest is not lined at all. Coutil is a really great fabric choice to use for corsets specifically because it has a very thick texture to it and it does not stretch at all. Once we have all of our pieces flatlined together, it's pretty simple. I personally decided to sew the middle seams first and then sew the side seams together just to make it a little bit easier for myself. And then since velveteen and duck canvas are pretty thick fabrics, I decided to use an additional top stitch for all of the layers in order to get that like nice clean flat finish. But you definitely want to press your seams before you do any of this. So I decided a zipper would be the easiest way to get into that bodysuit, because imagine trying to lace up all of those laces on that corset. I would also need help doing that too, so we're not gonna do that. I found a really fun way to make zippers that makes it really easy. First, you're going to want to sew the back seam closed, or wherever you want your zipper. I recommend the back, but you can do whatever the hell you want. For this case, I decided to go with I think mine was about 1.5 centimeters. You're gonna wanna give yourself extra room on the seam allowance for this second part. After you have that down, you're going to wanna press it flat and pin your zipper tape to the seam that you just made underneath and pin everything in place. What you're going to want to do is top stitch both sides as normal. Again, for my case, I used blue for the blue side and then red thread for the red side. Seam rip those middle seams that you just made. It's recommended to do the longest stitch that your sewing machine will allow you to do, just so that we're kind of basting it down. We're not making it a permanent stitch. Once you seam rip that, you will have a completely finished, clean zipper. And that's pretty much how I made the bodysuit. Okay, so for the last portion of the bodysuit, we're going to make all of the cuffs. I decided to make mine pleated. You can make yours however you want. I got a little lazy by patterning these. I bought the 60-inch width polyester dupioni from Fabric Wholesale Direct. So I cut those pieces into 6-inch strips, folded them over, serged them, flip them out, and then press them. Always press your fabric. It is going to make your pleats come out so much more crisp. As far as pleating it, I found this super helpful hack from Hack Cosplays on YouTube and TikTok. They actually use a fork to make all of their pleats. And it's awesome because you don't have to do any math, and it's super easy, and all of your pleats come out super symmetrical. I'm getting excited about these pleats. So after you do all of this, it's just a matter of sewing it directly to the cuffs of the costume. For the sleeves, I found that I didn't need much stretch, so I just sewed those directly onto the elastic. Actually, I sewed it slightly on top of the elastic, so the elastic can still stretch, but just a little less because of the pleats. Now, I have thicker thighs, so I can't really do that method for the thighs. Let me actually get my costume so I can show you this. So this is the bottom cuff. And as you can see here, some of it not sewn to the bodysuit directly. What I did was I measured my leg sitting down because that's when it's at its largest. And then I measured how much pleating I was gonna need. Then I sewed from the front part of my leg to the back and left the full inner thigh part unsewn. That way, that part of the elastic can still stretch when I need to sit down. In order to keep it from hanging while I'm standing up or whatever, I tacked it at specific places just so that it stays up on the bloomer. But otherwise, you're not really gonna wanna sew that part down if you're anything like me and need some extra stretch. Or you can just go the route of using a spandex or something. That's probably easier. For all of the yellow pleating, I added this pretty little daisy lace. I recommend this lace. It was $10 or $12 and you can get a lot of it from Amazon, and I thought it added some super extra cohesion. I originally used tacky glue. I'd actually recommend you use hot glue. Hot glue is really good at gluing fabric together. Okay, so for the last parts of the bodysuit, let's make the collar. So Pomni just has a traditional little Peter Pan collar on her bodysuit. I decided to make mine a pleated collar. Basically started with a circle skirt pattern, for lack of a better word, and I just made it wider than twice as long as the actual circumference of the bodysuit in order for me to pleat it down with that same fork method, and then I just hand sewed that directly onto the bodysuit. So the other thing I made for the costume is this cute little Elizabethan ruff collar. It's not perfect, but I think it came out pretty cool. The Stitchess on YouTube has a very in-depth, extremely helpful video on how to make Elizabethan ruff collars. Mine is not a historical recreation by any means. Basically, you're gonna start with a very long strip of fabric. You're gonna need very long pieces. I actually sewed 2 whole strips together in order to get the width or the length of this. As far as how thick you want your Elizabethan ruffs to stick out, you're going to measure that as the width and then fold it in. In my case, I think I used about 4-inch strips because this one looks to be about 2 or 1 inch long. I didn't want it to be extra bulky, so I'd actually recommend doing a smaller ruff than like a thicker ruff. Traditionally, you're supposed to starch these. I was lazy, but I definitely recommend like doing some kind of interfacing or starching or fabric stiffener in order to keep your Elizabethan ruff nice and stiff, because mine kind of crushes on itself. Then the second part you're going to want to make is the little strip on the outside. This needs to be the width of your neck. In my case, it was 12 inches and I added a little bit more so that I'd have enough room to add these little Velcros onto the costume. I used Wonder Clips, or those little plastic sewing clips, to keep everything in place. And then you're supposed to do like an accordion hand stitch to keep the Elizabethan ruff together. What I did instead, I used a hand stitch through each of the little ruffs, cut about 2 on each stitch, and then that's how I got my ruffs to stay up. You could also use glue for this because these don't need to be super strong, but yeah. The last thing I did to finish off this piece is I used 2 elastics, one that attaches the collar together, and then I used a second elastic to stick those last 2 together. That's how I made my ruff. That is the second to last thing that we have on the Pomni bodysuit. So the last thing I did for my Pomni cosplay was I made these cute little buttons. They fell off in the wash, but these are the little buttons that I made. They are super cute. These I made with this pinwheel contraption thing. I'd actually recommend getting like the large or the extra large. I didn't record this part on my B-roll, so I will just briefly explain how you can make these. So these are the 2 pieces. It comes with like this little sheet and this little sheet. You're gonna start with this one, and you're gonna make a piece that goes around the border. Definitely give yourself a little bit of room and fabric treat it if you're using Dupioni specifically. I use Tacky glue. You're going to add your sheet and add this on top, and you're gonna click this into place. From there, you have little holes on this part. You're gonna take your sewing needle and go out one hole and through the other. And do that all the way till you get to one side, then you can pop the whole thing out. And it's basically just a circle with gathered stitches. So you're gonna wanna pull your gathered stitch until you get to this kind of shape. And I found that I would push the seam allowance into the hole so that you get a nice and clean pinwheel. And I sewed the buttons directly onto the costume. And now, my friends, we are actually done with the bodysuit. Now, I'd argue that this is most of the Pomni cosplay, so this is the portion that I spent the most time perfecting, but at this point, it's smooth sailing from here. Let's work on the shoe covers and the gloves. I made my Pomni cosplay with huge sleeves and huge bloomers. I like to have my silhouettes matching, so I have a lot of platform shoes in my collection. So I used these Yosuke platform sneakers. They're from a Japanese brand. I thought the platform would kind of help to break up the silhouette, and that's the shoe cover I ended up using. You're going to want to make a duct tape pattern. I used this pleather fabric for the sole of the shoe. I find that it helps me from slipping and sliding at cons. You can also add little shoe grippers to get the same effect. But I didn't want to use like the fabric on there because nothing really sticks to the pleather very well, so I recommend using it as a shoe bottom. Those I got lazy and I just sew them up. Like when I put the shoe on, put the shoe cover on, and then I sew them up directly. When I'm about to cosplay Pomni, you could do a zipper, you could do hook and eye, snaps, Velcro, pretty much anything except what I did. The gloves, those are pretty self-explanatory. Even if you're not good at gloves, you can make Pomni gloves because she's got comically huge clown gloves, so even if your gloves don't fit and you think they look stupid, you probably look accurate. Anyway, so I kind of just sat my hand on the fabric and traced like a huge pattern. You want bigger than you need because you can always take it in. You can't unpick it and make it bigger if it's too small. I don't actually cut out my pattern. I actually just pin everything in place and then sew the drawing that I actually did, and that's how I came up with my gloves. Last but certainly not least, let's make her signature jester hat. This part was probably the most difficult for me because I just struggled really hard to get the shape. There is a Etsy pattern from Rufflebuttcosplay, I believe, for a Pomni Jester hat. So if you really struggle with jester hats like I do and you don't want to pattern it, I'd highly recommend just using their pattern. So to make the pattern for my jester hat, I used kind of like a beanie. My sister has like this cat-eared beanie that I used. Basically, you want something that doesn't need to stretch much to sit on your head. Then I kind of drew the pattern out that I wanted. That part was pretty simple. Now, getting the shape of her hat was not as easy. I initially started off with a wire-based pattern that's kind of folded at a triangle, bent over, and then inserted into the jester hat pieces. And then I really struggled with the stuffing volume to kind of like gauge the shape. I found with like minimal pieces of stuffing, it just looked like a nightcap. And then when I added too much stuffing, it just looked like a crazy nightcap. Anyway, here's how it came out when I finished my mock-up pattern. And it's pretty much similar as always. You just assemble the pattern pieces together. For the tips of the jester hat, I actually found it easier to hand sew. For the little portion, like the little bells on her hat, I just used that same Dupioni fabric and I gathered it. I actually plan on remaking these. I either want like bigger ones with stuffing in them, or I might use bells. I've seen people use bells on their Pomni Jester hat, and that's really cute. For the lining, I just use velveteen because they have like a pretty good base to where they kind of don't slide off the head like something like satin would. With that being said, drum roll please, our Pomni cosplay is finished. This cosplay took me 2 months to craft, and I had a lot of fun making it. It was a huge breath of fresh air working with all of those fun colors. For this cosplay specifically, I do have some recommendations as far as the makeup and the bodysuit is concerned. I just purchased a white bodysuit off of Amazon for about $25 to do like the white skin and legs. For the face part, with that high neck ruffle collar, you can get away with just doing your face and not kind of blending it down to your neck. For the face paint, I recommend Marron and Clown White. I find it to be the best because as a darker skinned person, that's the only one that builds onto my face the fastest. For setting powder, which you will need for this cosplay, you can use baby powder, which I heard from a friend, and you can also use the e.l.f. white setting powder and like a powder puff. I found that that worked pretty well for my case wearing it. You can also use whichever white setting powder that you want, but I'd highly recommend you use something to set your face because that, like, all face paint will wipe off if you don't set it properly. After that project came out back in February, I decided to compete at the Charlie's collectible show and I won a craftsmanship award. Yay! And I got a free MomoCon ticket. It's so much fun. Here's some footage of me walking on stage. I was trying to be like in character or whatever. I love wearing this Pomni cosplay so much. It's become like one of my favorite comfort cosplays to wear. I wore it again at MomoCon and I got up with some friends and we did like a group shoot that was so much fun. Here's some photos that we took at MomoCon this year. I even went to the Glitch Productions booth at MomoCon and got myself a little Pomni. It's a great show. R.I.P. to Gummy Goo. It's a very comfortable cosplay. It's great for conventions. I highly recommend if you're thinking about making yourself a Pomni cosplay, this is your sign to make it. If you decide to make your Pomni cosplay with any of the tips and tricks that I gave you today, please tag me either on Instagram or on TikTok. I am Comical Cosplay on both, and I would love to see your take on this Pomni cosplay. If you have anything that you're working on while watching this video, I'd also love to know about it. I'm nosy as hell and I like hearing about other people's special interests. Also, thank you so much for watching this video. This is my first time making a YouTube video in over 13 years. I've been meaning to make videos talking about my cosmaking progress for probably about 2 years now, so I'm happy I even just made this video. I have over 2 years of cosmaking under my belt, so I have a lot of projects to document you guys on. If you want to know how I made this Yuna cosplay, or this Star Guardian Zaya cosplay, or hell, this Sly Cooper cosplay, definitely stay tuned because I am planning on making videos for every single cosplay I've made up until now. Also, if you are a Lolita fashion haver, I have been collecting for over 2 years, and I do plan to make videos every now and then talking about my Lolita wardrobe. So if you are interested in any kind of Lolita fashion content, I also plan on making that as well. If any of the content that I've posted has appealed to your special interest, consider giving me a like or possibly subscribing to see more content from me. Anyway, I hope you, yes you, have a wonderful day.